Welcome to Improv Pathways Lesson 3. Let's jump right into some vocabulary here. The first one is chord. A chord is a group of tones that sound good together. Now in jazz, we use 1, 3, 5, which is common. All classical music uses 1, 3, and 5. But we're also going to use the 7th, okay? And for now, we're going to teach you to use the flat 7th. So here are the chord tones. 1, 3, 5, flat 7, and when we play them at the same time, it sounds like this. Sounds nice, huh? What do we hear if we play 1, 2, 3, and 6 at the same time? We hear this. And what if we hear 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 at the same time? See, they don't sound so good. But when we just use 1, 3, 5, 7, it sounds nice. We call that a chord. Now, if we play one note at a time, we have an arpeggio. That was up, here's down. And then put it all together, we have the full arpeggio. Now, we've been focusing so far on a single scale and a single chord, and we're going to call this now the one chord, because it's the primary chord that we're going to use improvising in the songs we're going to learn. So any song has kind of a root fundamental chord that is the basis of that song. It usually starts on that chord and ends on that chord. So in any song, we'll refer to that as the one chord. In our case, the one chord is concert B flat 7. And when we talk about chords in terms of numbers like that, we use Roman numerals. So the one chord is actually the letter I right there. And of course, the 4 chord then would be IV, 5 chord would be V. Now, there's a song that you're all pretty familiar with. It goes like this. It's called Heart and Soul. Yeah, you've heard that before. A lot of you played it on the piano probably. Well, that song goes 1 chord, a 6 chord, 4 chord, 5 chord. Okay, it goes like that. And it's easy to play on a piano. You play a note and then the 3rd and the 5th of it. Then you go down a little bit to this 6th note of the scale, but below 1, you know. And you go 6, 3, 5. And then you go 4, 3, 5, 5, 3, 5 of each chord. I don't know if that all makes sense to you, but every song that we know and love uses multiple chords. And so we're going to teach you throughout this method just 3 chords total: 1 chord, 4 chord, and 5 chord. But let's not get too deep into it right now, okay? Now the last vocabulary is a passing tone. A passing tone is a note that's not a chord tone, but you can still pass through it and play it as a part of the melody, no matter what the chord is. So here's the chord tones. 3, 5. I just passed through the 4th note right there. Now, you're not going to want to hang around on the 4th note of the scale if you're improvising. You're also not going to want to hang around the 6th a whole ton or the 2nd note a whole ton. Okay, but you can always pass through them as you're going from one chord tone to another. A solo using only chord tones would be kind of lame. It would sound like this. But if I can use passing tones, then I can get all kinds of cool sounds. You can also use chromatic passing tones, like this. They sound nice too, huh? Now, saxophone is not my primary instrument, but I love playing it. So forgive my mistakes and, bad tone maybe and things like that. Okay, now we're going to get to one of my favorite parts of this entire method, and that is the group improv exercises. So we're going to start with group improv 1, which just uses the notes of the 1 chord. And we're going to learn 3 basic riffs, but then we're going to improvise using those riffs. Okay, let's start with the bass line on the bottom. I like to start with that one. So the bass line is like this. Can you see it? Okay, easy. Try it. Okay, now let's go on to riff 2, which is this. Okay, let's play that a couple times. 1, 2, here we go. Nice. Now let's go up to riff 1 on the top. And that will sound like this. Okay, try that one. 1, 2. There we go. All right, we'll stop there. Now, the fun is when we start to take these riffs and we improvise by changing the rhythm. Okay, that's the easy way to improvise, is just to change up the rhythm. So let's start with the bass line. Let me give you an example. You know, the bass line is 1, 3, 5, 4, 3, 2. But I'm going to change the rhythm up like so. Okay, don't add any notes. Just have some more fun with the rhythm. Okay? So let me let you try it a couple times. So 1, 2, 3, go. And a 1. Again, here we go. 1. 1. Okay. Now it's important that you do land on beat 1. That you land on the first note of the scale. You know, you land on the root on beat 1 of the first measure. That's very important. The bass line. You can't land on that note on the end of 1 or on 2 or whatever. It's got to be there every time. But everything else, you can change the rhythm up however you want. So I'm going to have you now play either riff 1 or riff 2, but you're going to change the rhythm of that. For example, on riff 2, you can go. Okay? So I'm going to play the bass line for you, and you go ahead and play riff 1 or riff 2 and improvise with the rhythm. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. All right. How'd it go? Did you have any fun? Now we can make it a little more challenging by letting you add passing tones. Okay? Mostly passing tones in the basic major scale, but you can try some chromatic passing tones if you want to. Now for this exercise, I'm going to go ahead and have you play along with the track. But first, let me tell you a quick story. I did a clinic in Colorado many years ago, and I brought up some people from the audience. This was a bunch of music teachers and college students who were planning to be teachers. I brought them up from the audience, and they brought their instruments with them, and I just taught them these 3 riffs for Group Improv 1. And I said, now, you're going to all play together. You're going to improvise. You're going to make it up by changing the rhythm and adding passing tones. And so they did it, and they sounded great. You know, they were really good players. But after this clinic, a trombone player who was playing one of the parts came up to me and said, man, I have taken improvisation classes and lessons, and I've learned all my skills, and I've practiced for hours and hours and hours, and that is the first time I ever really felt like I was improvising. And it was fun. And that was such an awesome experience for me, because it said to me, you know what people need? They need a chance to improvise with a small group of notes in a small setting with a couple of rules that make it kind of simple, and then it can be both fun and expanding. Like this was his real first step into the world of making up music however he from his heart, making up music however he felt, that we call improvising, you know. So that was a cool moment. All right, so you're going to have this chance now in a group setting, Group Improv 1, even if you're at home all alone. I'm going to play this track for you now and get ready. Now you're going to listen first for a moment. Group Improv number 1. Don't play yet. Just to remind you how it's supposed to go, how it's supposed to sound. Although you really get to make it sound however you want. You get to make it your own by improvising with it. All right, now it's your turn to try the bass line. Bass line. 1. Land on 1. All right. Now try riff 2. now try riff 1. So if you're with other people now, you may want to pause this video right now and take a few minutes to actually do this with real live people. All right, now the last part of the lesson today is just a brief history lesson of jazz. Now the first jazz music is often called Dixieland. Officially it's called early jazz, but most of us know it by the term of Dixieland. And it started in New Orleans, and it's probably happening in other places too, but that was the real hotbed of jazz, where it all happened, where it was created in a sense, all right? And this new jazz music, was a fusion of African-American styles of singing and talking and playing, and American brass band music, like marches, and also the traditional Christian spirituals at the time. So we throw these things all together, plus people who don't really know how to read music, but they want to make music anyway, and we have this early jazz, or Dixieland. And it became extremely popular in the 1920s and 1930s. A traditional Dixieland band has 5 to 7 members, and you'll see them there at the bottom of your book. I'm going to talk about each one briefly. So just like your jazz band might have now, a Dixieland band had to have some kind of a bass part, and so that was provided either by a tuba or an upright bass. And of course, they played the bass line. It's kind of like in our group improv exercise. Of course, it would be an octave or two lower than that, but that's the idea, some kind of oompa. Later jazz bands would use walking bass lines, which is more like this. Okay, but this early jazz would just have more of an oompa, 1, 5, 1 sort of a feel. Now the drum set, of course, adds a lot of nice flavor and rhythmic spice to the playing, and Dixieland groups could have even just as little as a bass pedal and a snare drum, or a bass pedal and a snare drum and a hi-hat, like one cymbal maybe. Like a lot of them didn't have huge drum sets with all these different cymbals and drums and tom-toms, because all you need is a how's my beatboxing, huh? Okay, then you usually have one chord instrument, which is either a piano or a banjo, and they would give us a chung 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 chung, or the piano player would play chung 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 chung, and sometimes the piano player would actually double the bass or even provide the entire bass line. So those instruments would be part of the rhythm section, right? And then you'd have a front line made up of 2 or 3 horns, maybe more sometimes, but usually it's just 2 or 3. And the trumpet or cornet would often play the melody, okay? And Louis Armstrong was one of the most famous first cornet players, jazz cornet or trumpet players. So they might play the melody like this, and when the Saints go marching in. So the trumpet person would play the melody, but they could also improvise with that melody and toy around with it and play around with it and have some fun with it rhythmically and with the note choices. Then you usually have a clarinet or saxophone player do a lot of noodling. They play a lot of arpeggiated ideas. Now I'm going to probably slaughter this, but they might do stuff like this. Or I can sing it better than I can play it, right? Often it would be a clarinet player, and they'd do a lot of just fast, crazy playing. Oh man, I wish I was good enough to demonstrate that. Okay, and then lastly, there would often be a trombone player. The trombone player would usually emphasize the 3rd and the 7th of the chord, sometimes the root of the chord also, but the trombone player would do less arpeggiation and more Trombone player wouldn't so much do lots of up and down quick noodling, but would play a counter melody For example, when the Saints go marching in, the trombone player might go ba ba da ba 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 da ba da ba da ba da. Some kind of counter melody that would balance out the melody in the trumpet. And of course, trombone players also do lots of smearing. Wah, ba da ba da ba ba, ba ba doo da da ba ba. If a trombone player is doing lots of glissandos, then we call that tailgate trombone. Wah, ba da ba da ba ba, ba da ba da wah. Now here's an example of some Dixieland music. And here's another example. The recording technology of the time really limited the tone quality you could get in these groups. And so it sounds really old-fashioned, but it is so much fun to listen to. It's so much fun to listen to, and especially so much fun to perform, because everybody is improvising, essentially improvising at the same time. And so this is kind of why improvising is kind of the heart and soul, the lifeblood of jazz music. And to this day, jazz musicians all improvise throughout the music, and especially when they're taking a solo. This is the end of Lesson 3. Thank you for joining us. Hope to see you again in Lesson 4 and beyond. You can pick up the Improv Pathways Jazz Method at improvpathways.com.